including me at a young age.
Well, my boss was telling me about the whole air quality thing because I'm not sure that the Canadian case is on the East Coast actually.
We're also getting Sahara, chances of Sahara.
Way across the ocean, yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I had not heard about this.
That's true.
Okay, folks. Adjust the camera. There we go. Welcome, everyone, to this reading with Mark Salzwedel, a gay novelist and magazine editor and bon vivant. Paul Hagen, that's your title, Paul. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, along with my partner, Donnie Jokum. And tonight we're being helped out by our volunteer, Brendan McCall, who also sells a couple of books here. So thanks for coming out tonight. The Bureau is an independent, all-volunteer queer bookstore that Donnie and I founded in 2012, and that's been here at the LGBT Community Center since 2014. And we have regular business hours Wednesdays through Sundays from 1 to 7 p.m. And then we often stay open later for events such as this. If you're not already on our email list, you can sign up for that at the back of the room, or for those of you watching online, on our website, bgsqd.com. There's 5 letters all around me. I think that is it for logistics from me. We encourage you to check out Mark's books, which are at the back, and then there are plenty of others as well, which we hope you'll also take a look at, and support us by buying books or making a donation, whichever way you're able to do it. We appreciate it. So before I introduce Mark, I wanted to read a land acknowledgement. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. The Bureau also recognizes Palestinian liberation as a fundamental part of our collective queer liberation. And we encourage you to read our flyer on why we feel it is important for queer people, especially, to speak out in solidarity with Palestine. And that's in the back corner, so please check that out. And now, it is my privilege to introduce Mark Salzwedel, an author, poet, screenwriter, singer, actor, director, editor, and composer. What don't you do, Mark? Living in Brooklyn, New York.
No windows.
No windows. All right, that's it. One poem won the Comet Prize in September. One short story was included in an anthology in March. Forthcoming works include a gay time travel novel, Time Bump, a sci-fi short story collection, Mrs. Babbage's Home for Wayward Robots, a gay thriller, Honor the Crest, another LGBT magical realism novel, Missing Things, and a feature-length bilingual gay rom-com script, Doce Cruces. So please give Mark a warm welcome. And Paul. Please give Paul a warm welcome as well.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for that beautiful introduction and for all the wonderful work that you've done for our community. It's so important to conserve our culture. Folks and friends, gays and days, we are so happy you could join us today for this wonderful Pride Month event. Happy Pride Month 2025 to you, Mark, and to our crowd. Thank you so much. I think it's never too early to reach out to your queer siblings and remind them that whatever the federal government says, we're here, we're queer, and somebody better get used to it. These are complicated times we're living in, and these are not always conducive to creativity, but as our friend Jonathan Larson reminds us, the opposite of war isn't peace, it's creation. So what a great opportunity to celebrate creation with Mark, who does, as we learned in the introduction, a whole lot more than queer fiction, but has written and published two beautiful novels, and we have more in the hopper to discuss. We will get into his past, his process, all sorts of good things, but I did want to start by saying there will be a time at the end of our presentation where we will turn to you for questions. So as we chat and as Mark reads, if something occurs to you, grab it, hold on to it with your brain. I will give you a chance to direct questions to Mark a little later in the program. Let it fly away like so many moths into the night. With that, I thought maybe we can start with a big picture question, Mark. One of the erstwhile reasons we are gathered here today is to discuss queer fiction, the nature of queer fiction. So I thought I'd start by asking how you define queer fiction, how much queer content is enough to qualify, tell us about queer fiction.
All right. I've been talking a lot in my social media lately about what defines queer fiction, because there's sometimes some problem with the concept of our voices, own voices. So a lot of minorities feel very strongly that people that are writing with content should be members of the group they're writing about. So there are sometimes women and straight men that write fiction that's about gay people, and they were saying, well, what qualifies as gay fiction? Does it have to be own voices? Does it have to have just gay characters? And I think we try, and as far as authors and the writing community, and to a large extent in the book reading community, to think of gay fiction as just having a minimum gay lead characters. If they're side characters, that doesn't qualify by almost anybody's margins. So that would be the least amount. The most amount, Paul, would be trying to make sure that if the characters in your novel were straight, could the plot be resolved in the same way?
Okay.
If it couldn't be resolved without them being gay, then it's even better gay novel. It's more authentic.
You bring up such a good point. I struggled with it myself as a creator. You kind of come into the creative world, and I think it is usually because of a push to imagine and bring imagination into being, whether that is in a song or a story on the page or stage. And then you start being educated as an artist, and everyone says, write what you know, write what you know. And if you are a person of an adventurous spirit, you will go out and try to live as much life as possible so you have something to write on the page. And sometimes we lose, I think, a little bit of that wonderful creative spark that led us there in the first place. So I kind of wanted to ask how you balance those two sides of the coin, the lived experience coin, which is so important to representation especially, but still allowing yourself to be, essentially every character in your book, whether that is a Black lesbian journalist or a magician, how do you both celebrate lived experience while also continuing to explore and embrace your own creativity?
Well, I started out writing when I was 10, but I started out acting and singing when I was about 7. So I've been doing it a long time. And one thing I think is a crossover skill is embodying a character. When you are an actor on the stage, you're trying to, as closely as possible, make sure the physicality is there, the sound of the voice, any accent, any twitches or disabilities are all there. And when you're writing characters for a novel or a short story, you're also trying to embody the character so that it's not all, clones of you. You have to be able to put yourself in the place of overweight, middle-aged Black lesbian, at certain points. And think, well, okay, where would she sweat? Between her cornrows? Probably. Or would she be feeling the problem of having to walk a long distance down a very, very long driveway in fancy shoes?
Mhm.
Yes. So I try to keep those things in mind. I've also had characters who were blind and in a wheelchair,
Okay.
so that he doesn't have as much physicality, and he has no visual cues. So I had to think, how would a person who had those disabilities perceive the world, and how they interact with people in the world? So it's a matter of putting that different frame of mind in mind, because no matter how much experience I get meeting other people or going into other places, I'm not ever going to be inside somebody else's experience the way I'm within my own experience. So I tried as much as possible, if it's too far from my experience, we get these things called sensitivity readers. And so I started writing a new novel that's not quite finished yet, Missing Things, the one that Greg mentioned, has a trans male character.
Okay.
And I can relate to the gay part of it, but not to the transition part, not to the prejudices and all the other things, right now, even greater danger they're in. So those sort of things have to enter my mind as well, but I don't know all about a very specific process, which is the transition process, so I had to get that stuff validated by a sensitivity reader who'd gone through that.
Okay. You know, I'm so glad to hear you mention that particular part of the process, because there was a chunk of my life when I was basically writing every day at lunch, and there was a little restaurant that's no longer there called Spoon, and I would find myself, especially as there was a dialogue-heavy scene, essentially having silent but very expressive conversations with myself, and I wondered occasionally if my fellow New Yorkers were looking over at me going, oh, that's one of the crazy ones. But I 100% ascribe to your belief that essentially the author is long form playing all of the characters in a drama, and the more you invest, as you were saying, the greater the drama that will result on the page. That said, I do want to also take us all the way back to the beginning, now that we rushed into the heady topic of queer fiction now, and ask you if there are any storytelling moments you remember from your childhood that were impactful or that resonate for you in the way that you create now.
It's a toughie. Let's see, anything from my childhood, you mean?
Yeah, or your childhood, your developing period,
That's
5 years
tough.
ago. Yeah.
I remember reading Black Beauty.
Oh, sure.
It's about a horse, and you have the point of view of the horse. I think that was important just because it got me thinking about point of view and narrators.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be a human, and you can be very creative about who the characters are. You don't have to be stuck in a clone of yourself. You can start with, a character being a chair. Just how far can you take your creativity, or a person, a chair that used to be a person, something. I don't know.
Did you, in considering that question, does that inform whether you're writing in first person or third person?
I tend to think of third first person gives me more flexibility as far as how I can make different types of narrators, different points of view. Sometimes, like in the book The Lever, I have like 4 different point of view characters, and I can't do that with first person.
Right.
With first person, like in my forthcoming novel, Time Bump, we're following his point of view through the whole story. That's a chance to make it maybe a little bit more immediate with that first person narrating.
Do you find that writing in first person feels immediately different to you in that way then?
Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated to try to get other people's point of view sort of stuck into the first person narrator, and it limits what you can show at one time. Fortunately, with a book like Time Bump, I had the advantage of at certain points the narrator is talking to himself, so it was, and not just the way you do it at the Spoon. There's another copy of himself talking to himself.
Oh, literally, like a clone or
Yes. Doppelganger, I call it.
I don't want to give away potential plot points, so I won't try to guess too much.
Okay.
you know, coming out is so central to the queer experience, and I was wondering if you have any of your writing or remember any of your writing that you were doing during that period and how it helped you process the queer person you were becoming.
I read, we had no bookstores in the town where I grew up, little town, Whitewater, Wisconsin. The closest bookstore was at the mall in Janesville, Wisconsin, which was only a car ride away. It's not a place you could bike to. So I had to go to the bookstore when my parents were going there shopping. And I'd say, can I sneak away and look in the bookstore? And I found books by Edmund White, Andrew Holleran, people like that. And those were some of my first chances to see that gay people were more than just normal. They were actually more exciting and fun than the straight people. So I remember one scene where they were having sex on the back of a moving motorcycle. I thought, wow, that must be hard to do.
Yeah, it's so true. I definitely recall a point in my life when I thought queerness was only happening to me, and then when I thought it was out there, but definitely a crime, and God was very sad about it. And then there is that point where you start to see yourself represented, whether that's a character on TV, Billy Crystal on soap, you know, or something like a work of fiction or essay. And it's wild the way knowing other queer people exist banishes this essential loneliness. Do you feel like that is part of your mission as an author, to show people, queer people, to help complete their queer experience?
Oh, sure. I've gone both directions in my last two novels. And The Lever have almost an entirely gay cast. And there's a big desire in the marketplace now to see, especially in speculative fiction, the normalization of queerness. And on the other novel, Miraculous Life of Rupert Rocket, it's just he's sort of like more assimilating. He's sort of like just in his little place, and all the people around him are straight until he sort of finds his found family in New York. So I think both are useful, showing the struggle of people who are coming from a place where there aren't very many gay people, and also seeing sort of an ideal situation where it's so normal, it's sort of the majority of the people you're dealing with.
I think that is an excellent place to ask if you would like to share some of your prose with our audience.
Well, let's see, the one I mentioned last is the one I have up, so let's do
Terrific.
that one.
Is there anything that folks should know going into it, or do you want them to go in cold if they have not read?
Let's see, Rupert the book starts with his grandmother, Zelda, who gets on the wrong side of her fiance's ex, and the ex sicks a Irish fairy at her to curse her bloodline, and then her sister comes by and said, "Oh, I see you're another victim of my sister. Let me counteract that. Here's a blessing for 25 years. I hope it helps." And that lasts until the 25 years is up. Rupert's grandfather dies when the blessing is over, and they go through a horrible spate of bad luck until Rupert is born, and Grovich convinces Zelda to bring her to her daughter's hospital room and bless Rupert as a newly born child. And she said, well, be careful, because even though this will get you a blessing as quicker, because I can't, bless the same person twice, it's gonna be a little chaotic, because the person's so young, he's gonna have a whole lot of years for its luck to go back and forth.
Okay.
So that's sort of the setup. Rupert eventually, just to give you some preview, becomes, as an adult, a dancer, a model, an actor, and an international spy.
As are we all.
Yes, it's a later stage career. So this is from chapter 3, and I think you'll figure out who the characters are. Caroline is the daughter of Zelda and mother of Rupert. Okay. Another time, Caroline took him to the city pool to get him used to being in water. Rupert insisted she put his water wings back on him, even though they were getting ready to leave. And seconds after she conceded and fitted them back over him, a teenager goofing around knocked both Rupert and Caroline into the pool. When Caroline resurfaced, she frantically looked for Rupert. He was happily bobbing along nearby with the aid of the wings. And in the most spectacular example of Rupert's prescience, Rupert was a little frightened during an autumn thunderstorm at night. Caroline frequently got up to check on him and comfort him. At one point, she was awakened by a cry so loud it made her ears ring afterward. She rushed in, and Rupert was trying unsuccessfully to climb out of his crib and wailing louder than she'd ever heard him before. She picked him up and held him close. He stopped crying and repeated, "Appy, appy, 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 appy." Caroline wondered why he had such an urgent hunger for applesauce, but she carried him out of the nursery, intending to take him to the kitchen for a late-night snack. Once she was in the hallway, the house shook with a huge rumbling crash and the sound of shattered glass. Caroline could hear the sound of the wind and rain as if she were outside, and as she stepped back into the nursery, she almost choked when she saw it. The oak tree in the backyard between the saturated ground and the high winds had fallen against the house, breaking through the wall and window, smashing the changing table in the corner and the crib Rupert had been trying to escape only a minute before. The wind howled and the rain poured in sheets, and Rupert, still in Caroline's trembling arms, calmly reported, "Tree fall." After Rupert turned 3, his ability to avoid accidents disappeared, and he got lots of bruises, scrapes, cuts, and a dislocated shoulder at one point. Remarkably, every injury seemed to heal in less than a day. Even the dislocated shoulder had gone back into place by the time Zelda drove him to the hospital. Singing and dancing became one of Rupert's favorite pastimes. He would put on little shows for Zelda when she was babysitting him. Caroline was away more than she had to, because she had to help manage one of the 2 restaurants. Zelda decided to sell one of them to consolidate their dwindling staffs and give her daughter more time with her son. Whenever Caroline brought him to the restaurant, Rupert always wanted to climb onto the little raised platform in the back to perform. The customers seemed to love seeing the little boy sing and dance, and generously applauded and cooed. The manager said that tips increased when Rupert was there, so Caroline decided to bring him around more often. But Rupert's popularity turned around the slow business at the restaurant. Whether or not Rupert performed on stage, customers cheered just to see that he had arrived. When he performed, even if he fell while dancing or forgot part of the song, the applause would be immediate, and it frequently involved customers giving him a standing ovation. When Caroline would take Rupert in his stroller, people would rush up and ask if this was the little boy who performed at her restaurant. Caroline would suggest they stop by that night for dinner because there was a possibility he might perform. Rupert became a local celebrity, and gossip seemed to elevate the speaker who had managed to see Rupert most recently. Zelda took Rupert out in the stroller to the nearby park on a summer afternoon when he was 3.5 years old. Rupert liked to watch the ducks on the river. Zelda liked to replay her memories of walks along the river with Thomas, and she would smile for a while until she thought about how he was missing the birth and growth of his grandson, and how proud he would be of Rupert. That brought a tear to her eye. "Grandma, why are you crying?" the little boy had returned from communing with the ducks. Zelda got a handkerchief out of her purse and dabbed her eyes. "I was remembering your grandpa, and I was walking here before you were born. It made me sad that he's not here anymore." "He died," Rupert summarized. "I never met him. Mama showed me pictures, and she said he died. That's because he's not coming back again. Where did he go?" Zelda was a little shocked that Caroline had broached the topic of death with him at such a young age. She recovered enough to come up with a reasonable explanation. "His spirit went up to heaven, and we buried his body under the ground," she explained. "You buried him?" Rupert seemed a little shocked. When someone dies, the part that is them doesn't live in the body anymore. She held Rupert's hand and led him to a bench near where she'd parked the stroller. She lifted him onto the bench and then sat down beside him. The part we remember goes up into the clouds and travels among the stars. That would be cool, he declared. You'll have to wait a long, long time before you can take that trip, Rupert. Don't get his hopes up, a female voice said from behind the bench. Zelda didn't need to turn to know who it was, even after so many years. I didn't think we'd run into you again so soon, Grogich. The old woman sauntered around to the other side of the bench and sat down next to Rupert. The boy wanted to touch all the different fabrics that made up her coat. Zelda tried to pull him back. Don't bother the lady, she scolded him. It's okay, the Grogich said as she pulled Rupert up next to herself. She turned her gaze back towards Zelda. You both seem healthy. We've had some tight scrapes and some hard times, but things are starting to look up a little, Zelda reported. I was curious to see what your blessing would look like, and Rupert has manifested some amazing abilities. He will get a new one on his birthday every year, the older woman said. What have you noticed lately? Rupert stood up on the bench and became fixated on the woman's large ears. Zelda reached over to pull the boy away, but the Grogich gently pushed her hand away. It's okay, she said. He was anticipating harm just before an accident happened, Zelda narrated. Then he could heal very fast. I'm not sure what it is this year. He seems very popular in town. I guess it's because Carolyn takes him down to the restaurant to perform for the customers sometimes. The Grogich chuckled and set Rupert down on his bottom again on the bench. She tickled him a bit in the belly, and Rupert let out a string of giggles. This is the year of Rupert's charisma, she announced. I was wondering what drew me here so soon again. I wasn't planning to visit it again until he became an adult. Zelda allowed herself to laugh as well. The explanation made sense to her because all the attention Rupert got lately was well out of proportion to his charms and talents, she felt. This is finally a gift that has been a benefit to me more than just Rupert. He's bringing back customers to the restaurant, and we're making money again. Oh, the Grogich intoned. My dear, I'm sure his previous gifts saved you a lot of money you would have paid to hospitals and doctors, am I right? I suppose that's true. Zelda had accumulated a number of questions she wanted to ask the Grogich when she met her again. She tried to recall them. So if your blessing only lasts 25 years again, what will happen to Rupert on his 25th birthday? I have only limited experience blessing babies, the old woman confided. I don't think the good luck vanishes all at once as it did for you. I think it takes a while to dissipate. So does that mean I'll live another 21 and a half years? Oh, you're talking about the other part of the Puka's curse now, the Grogich said. She smiled at Rupert, who seemed to be content to watch the ducks from a distance. Well, the intention behind the curse, if I remember correctly, was to make sure your bloodline died with you. That can be open to interpretation now that the blessing is interacting with your family as well. Rupert can absolutely not die before he turns 25. And since my blessing is stronger than the Puka's curse, it should allow you to see him turn 25. But after that, I don't know how soon or how strongly the curse will take hold again.
Very nice. I couldn't help but think while you were writing that of times when I've either been working on a character that had a long, lifelong arc, or at least starts as a child, or even if you're writing a character that is pre-queer or pre-cognizant of their own queerness, and I usually when I ask a question, I kind of have an answer in mind. I have no sense of how to do it. But for you, when you're working with a character that is essentially pre-sexual, and you want to make sure they are imbued with that sense of the queerness that they are going to be, what do you look to put into the character to express that? Their nascent queerness.
Well, he's a bit of a nerd.
Okay.
That's often a good inroad. Let's see. He gets a blessing still as a teenager that makes him more sexually desirable, and that puts his stepfather in a difficult position at times. So there are some clues.
It's weird, it's like trying to write a thing that hasn't happened yet, or, you know, essentially that you, like, if you were writing a series, you might, in the first book, the character might not be out at all, and you want to imbue it with something that's queer, but, you know, they're not gonna go cruise at the pier. Although, who knows, children these days.
Not at 3, no.
But also, since we did get to a little bit of magic in that one, I was definitely interested in what I think is a perpetual topic in queer culture, which is why genre, and you've worked in science fiction, you've worked with magical realism, you've worked with a variety of fantastic elements, why, for the queer community, genre fiction is such a useful form of expression.
Well, I think the possibilities for taking you out of the everyday are a little bit more fruitful, or more numerous, I guess, just because when you get into science fiction, you can assume that gay people will be more accepted in the future. Mm-hmm. You can take yourself away from things like the current administration in Washington, or just people's outdated ideas of what masculinity and femininity could be. I think you get handicapped a little bit with literary fiction that's taking place in our modern contemporary times.
I 100% agree. Do you find when you sit down to write and you're faced with the possibility of dealing with prejudice and homophobia, or inventing how a whole world feels about prejudice and homophobia, is it a sort of relief to enter a world that is, like you said, more evolved in their perception of homosexuals?
Sure. I think there's a certain amount of wish fulfillment that comes with a novel where you have normative queerness that I think gives people hope that if this is like foretelling the future, this is where we're headed, and it makes people a little bit less hopeless, I think, sometimes. Yeah. What I find is helpful with like the novel The Lever is that because all of the characters are gay, and it's just sort of a few very small side characters are heterosexual or whatever, I've gotten a little bit more interest in that book, just because it does have that element to it as well. I think maybe the idea that gay people can be heroes is something that happens more frequently in genre fiction than in others.
I agree. Yeah, you touched my heart a little on that one, especially the hero line. Yeah, so often if the whole of your culture has been sidelined, there's never a chance for you to be the protagonist, and you really, very specifically in the case of Lever, are putting homosexual at the center, sexy gay characters throughout. I won't call them dancing boys, but they're kind of, I picture them as such. So since you brought up Lever, you were telling me, and I would love for you to share with the audience a little bit of what inspired Chanda, and I would love for you to talk about that. But also, I'd love for you to talk about more generally where your character inspirations come from. How much do you look into yourself? How much do you look to people you might know? Other fiction you've encountered along the way. Where do you find your characters?
I think there's a pretty predictable, not necessarily all the time, but often an author will go through a sort of a semi-autobiographical journey through fiction where, whether they call it or not, it's got a lot of their own personal experience in it. But I think as you evolve, you're more willing to explore other characters that are not you or only have one element of your personality in them. So I think with one of the main characters in The Lever is Shonda, and she's black, overweight, lesbian news reporter. So she's sort of like my audience surrogate because she doesn't know what's going on. She's always investigating, so that's helpful. But in that case, I wanted her to be truly from Atlanta, as one of the other characters is. So I was trying to figure out who has a Southern accent and is sort of like a very feisty black female role model. And I went mostly to a character that Whoopi Goldberg was playing in the movie Ghost.
Yes, Oda Mae.
Oda Mae. So I modeled my dialogue for Shonda after Oda Mae and Ghost.
You in danger, girl. I love you for Whoopi. I have Whoopi all day. It's to bring us back a little bit towards the introduction. I can't help but be impressed when you look at the list of just different forms of media and genres that you have worked in. And I was wondering if you found, well, what attracts you to working in different media, and do the things that poetry or music or long-form fiction provide you in terms of exploratory tools, do they help you explore the queer experience in different ways?
That's an interesting question. I think I tend to reveal a little bit more of my emotional life through my music and my poetry. My intellectual ideas and my philosophy through fiction. My political aspirations and frustrations through essays. And I don't know, I get sort of a sense of just wanting to tell a cute little story when I do operas.
Okay, a cute little story. So not the grand opera, then the more, I guess, maybe modern introspective opera?
Well, I have a couple that I'm working on. One is called The Repugnant Tap. And it's three evil sorcerers have lost their magic, and they have to do good deeds in order to get their magic back. But when they start doing good deeds for the townspeople, they start to recognize that this is not going anywhere good, because once they get their powers back, they're going to be enslaved again. So they have to find some other solution. And I think that's the more cute little story, even though it ends with their deaths.
Sometimes the
Bear
best
with
things
me,
do.
it's still cute. That happens at the very end, and it's like almost off stage. They just fall over. But anyway, the opposite is, the other one I'm working on that's not quite as far along is called 9 Dead Women. And it's takes place in a prison hospital in Manila, where a shoe lady, Imelda Marcos, yes, Imelda Marcos,
The shoe lady of
yes,
all time.
yes, Imelda Marcos is dying of a heart attack, and she's visited by the ghosts of 8 of her contemporary female leaders, world leaders, including Winnie Mandela, Margaret Thatcher, Nancy Reagan, people like that.
What interesting choices! My goodness,
Yes.
I am intrigued. As someone who has worked in maybe not quite as many genres as you, but I've dabbled in musical theater and songcraft. Is there something about the necessity of having other, in particular, like for the stage, having actors, singers involved to see the work fully realized? Is that exciting because it adds another layer to the process when it enters their hands, or is it frustrating because you can't deliver it to the page as completely as you might fiction?
I don't know. I think all art is collaborative on some level. And even with fiction, you have an editor and a publisher that review it. The designer brings a lot to it. The cover artist brings a lot to it. So it's also a production. I think when I'm able to get a contract from a traditional publisher like that, they take care of a lot of that stuff, but it's all part of a collaboration. And then when I do the publicity, I'm relying on podcasters, reviewers, a lot of other people, lovely people at bookstores, and that's part of the collaboration too. I think when I think about if I'm putting together a chorale that requires like 16 singers or something like that, I just have to think about there's no publisher I can go to sort of like, you take care of the singers, I'll bring the music. They don't do that. They expect me to bring the singers, so that becomes a little expensive. So that's the only hurdle, I think.
Since you brought it up, and we have not actually talked about this at all, but what was your process, or how involved were you in the process of choosing the covers for your published works?
For The Lever, I was given a stock stock photo site, and they said I could pick anything. They gave me some suggestions. Said no.
Okay.
And found something that looked really good, which is the part that ended up on the cover. And they added the long line through the L.
Yep.
But basically, they took my design.
Oh, great.
In the case of Rupert, I think they just wanted to have a dancer, and I thought, I was worried that would make it look too much like a biography.
Right.
So I said, can you make it like 3 different photos? And then they came up with that.
And it does, I think the ultimate product there, in addition to being a beautiful picture of a very gifted dancer, does kind of give you a sense, maybe you wouldn't go into it knowing the full depth and breadth of how far it'll go, but the fact that there are people of different ages and different eras of life, maybe kind of give you a sense going in that like, this is not an afternoon at a park, this is not a overnight one wild thing, this is, we're seeing a lot of evolution as the curse travels through the family line. You know what, maybe this is a good time to do another bit of reading.
Sure, from The Lever.
We get a little of a taste of The Lever for all y'all.
Okay. This is the all-gay cast science fiction. It has the black lesbian journalist as a main character. You'll pick up most of the rest of it, I think. Immediately from a speaker just above the censor, an automated female voice with a Canadian accent announced, "Shonda Kinney, pop-up news. 1 moment, please." Instead of the woman on the announcement, a teenage boy opened the tall door. He had darkly tanned skin, shoulder-length straight black hair, and eyes so dark they seemed to be all pupil. He looked at Shonda blankly, as if he didn't know why she was there, and then called over his shoulder in an odd mixture of Indian and Georgian accents, "Auntie, it's that reporter." Some indistinguishable call from further inside produced a nod in the boy, and he stepped aside to let Shonda in. He closed the door and pointed toward the dining room. A second later, he hopped on a hoverboard that glowed neon blue and then carried him up the grand staircase. Shonda wandered tentatively into the dining room and realized she was clutching the satchel to her chest with both arms like a shield. She returned it to her side. The dining room was empty, filled with several china cabinets, a long oak dining table and chairs, some mirrors, and a crystal chandelier, but devoid of people. She started to turn back toward the foyer to seek out the boy for more information. She didn't want to go back out there and then climb the long staircase. She convinced herself that she just needed to get Madhu Vas to sign the release form and then leave. It should be simple. You want to know what really happened to your daughter? Sign this, and I'll find out for you. She trundled with more confidence through the swinging door at the far end of the room and into the kitchen. Shonda's first impression was the redolence of coriander and cardamom. Her focus was quickly drawn to a tiny woman with graying hair and an obviously transplanted face, resting on her arms, gazing at a moving hologram projected above the light blue tablecloth in front of herself. She had the foreshortened limbs and pointed chin that was a side effect of postnatal genetic treatment for cystic fibrosis. She raised only her pupils and eyebrows when she saw Shonda enter. You're that reporter investigating Clarissa's disappearance? The woman squeaked out in a voice so high-pitched it was childlike. Shonda retrieved the consent form with the GenStar logo at the top from her satchel. I just need you to sign this form so I can look at Clarissa's records. It might help me to find out what happened to her. A small, older woman watched the form slide across the tablecloth under her hologram and stared at it when it came to rest. They took her, she said without looking up. Her face was resolute and confident. She turned off the hologram and looked up finally. Clarissa was in perfect health. She had no enemies. She was trained in several martial arts, and she traveled with a bodyguard. Shonda sighed. She was reminded that she wasted too much of her life talking to informants spinning paranoid fantasies. Okay, why did she have a bodyguard if she had no enemies? Do you read the news? The woman almost shouted, suddenly very animated. Sex slavery, telomerase farms, corporate warfare, sleeper agents. Mrs. Voss, do you have any hard evidence that Clarissa is still alive? Shonda interrupted. Or are you just guessing? Reminding her how little she actually knew did the trick. She watched the woman scan the form and place her thumb on the blue circle. The form glowed green. The woman shoved the form back at Shonda. I'm depending on you to dig up the hard evidence. I can't have any more children. I want my Clarissa back. Shonda wanted to respond, but she got what she had come for, so she just nodded and headed back through the mansion toward the front door. Her next stop was Druid Hills to get another form signed. She stopped and took 2 deep breaths as she was letting herself out the tall front door of the mansion.
An artist-to-artist question. Do you feel when you are re-encountering your work in this way, is it more like, because it came out of you and you went through all the editing process, like reciting a poem that you've known for a long time, or does it surprise you all over again as you encounter it sort of in this off the page and into the mic different setting?
I have 2 minds about it, I guess. In some ways, I do rediscover it on some level, but sometimes the discovery is not a good one because I notice things that I could have improved on.
Interesting, and it's already published, so
Yes.
now.
Damn, there's too much detail in that sentence. I should have made it half as long. Stuff like that.
Well, hopefully you don't beat yourself up too much.
I do not.
Okay. Well, your accent work is terrific. Do you love accents?
A little bit.
So it's less about creating it out of a fascination with accents and more like you were saying earlier, like you wanted something specific about this character, so you hunt for the right accent for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Do you tend towards any certain accents?
I've had a lot of Southern accents, British accents.
Those are my 2 big ones too.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what else.
Irish, you did some Irish, which would be
Irish,
great,
yes,
yeah.
I had Irish, yeah. I had some Scottish in one of my novellas. That's about it, I think. I don't go too about. Oh, I have done Nigerian as well.
Hey now.
Yes.
Well, and who knows where else you yet may go. So creative habits are so key to productivity. I know in part because I lost so many of mine over the pandemic. I was interested, especially for artists who are here in the room and watching at home, what your creative process is, how much you outline, how much you plan, and how much you let yourself be spontaneous as you write.
I do a thing called pre-writing, which means that I start writing something, usually with maybe up to a page of plot outline, and then very brief paragraphs on each of the characters. That's about all I prepare before I start writing. And then I write until I get stuck somewhere, and it's usually within the first maybe 1, 2, or 3 chapters. It's early on. And that's usually enough work for me to let my subconscious start to work on it. I put it aside, and I actually don't work on it consciously for a certain amount of time. And I'll know when I need to go back to it when my subconscious has figured out the rest of the story.
It's so interesting. And it must be a little bit of a learned process, that accepting of the moment of frustration as maybe a good thing, because you know that you can transition to this sort of set it on in the back of your mind, and then good for you for having the bing that tells you it's done, and most
Just like an
importantly,
easy bake oven.
I love a good easy bake oven, even though I rarely ever got one to turn out. But hey, you're cooking on a light bulb, so how much can you ask?
It does go bing though.
It does the ding, and don't we all want to do the ding in this life?
Yes.
I was interested, as you put your work out there in the world, you have the fun and interesting responsibility of interacting with your readership. What do you prefer that to be like? What kind of encounters with people who've read your book have been memorable or valuable or maybe scary and frightening?
I like 5-star reviews.
Oh, hey,
I've decided that's my favorite.
smash the subscribe button.
I get a little bit paranoid about 4-star reviews, but I haven't gotten anything else, so I should be grateful, right?
Hey, yeah, 4s and 5s.
Yeah, they're all 4s or 5s. A lot of 5s.
I love 5s.
Yes, I love 5s too.
So you are not among the I don't read the review.
No, but I have contact with people that have read my books,
Cool.
so I do get personal feedback. And sometimes they said, it changed halfway through. I'm like, yeah, it was a plot device, yes.
You're like,
Sorry.
that was intentional.
That was supposed to happen, yeah. And sometimes they say, I really enjoyed it. I couldn't put it down. I'm like, yay, what do you remember from it? I don't know, but I was reading it steadily. I remember. What else? I've gotten really weird feedback on stuff that I didn't think I did very well.
Oh, interesting.
I had a short story, it was actually flash fiction, just a piece that took place at 3 o'clock in the morning in the heights, in the favela of Rio de Janeiro. Beggar girl encounters an alien who asks her for a gift. It's called What Will You Give Me? Something like that.
Okay.
What will you offer? That's what it is. And I think the other one was probably recently in December. I had a podcast interview, and the hosts of the podcast had taken another flash fiction piece that I'd done and didn't think very much of it. I thought it was a cute little thing.
Yeah.
And they sort of like were gushing about it for almost the entire time I was on the interview. And when they did the write-up afterwards, they said, "We wish we could be Mark Salzwedel." I'm like, really? And I thought, it's not that great a story, is it? Because I think it's cute, but they were just like going nuts over it. So it's called An Unexpected Cookie.
Good title.
It's about a commander in a war against aliens that have contact sympathy, so that they actually can transfer feelings by touching each other.
Interesting.
And most of their shipments get shot out of the sky before they can reach the ground, and they're getting supplies. But one gets through and has a box of cookies that somebody threw in, and she says, "Leave it there." Why? Why can't we take the cookies back? No, just trust me, let's leave it there. It ends up being the thing that the aliens had never thought would be the turning point in the war, because they get addicted to sugar.
Very good. Well, I can see that making an impact. It's actually very exciting, the idea of coming across someone who's experienced your work in a way that is outside your own scope of what you expected. I think that's so thrilling. If you, and this is something that kind of came to mind as I was listening to you read, if you had the opportunity to record an audio version of one of your books, would you be interested in doing it yourself? Would you be interested in having a performer or a full cast with multiple voices?
I have been a trained audio actor, so I could do voice acting myself, but I noticed that it's a lot of reading. It's like
It's a lot.
several hours of work. It's not anything easy, and I might be tempted to ask somebody else to do it just because I don't want to strain myself that much.
Sure. Well, and like you said, it's adding one collaborator to the mix kind of makes the whole pursuit that much more collaborative.
My reveals something interesting, you're right.
I'm excited. Which brings us, I think, to the point where we turn to our lucky audience and see if you have any questions for Mark about his writing, about the state of the world today, about what makes queer fiction. We open the floor to you, and if not, I have a couple extras in reserve.
And there are 5 of you in the room. And don't feel like you're excluded in any way, no matter how well you know us or how far back you're sitting.
And if you do happen to be shy,
We will call on you.
we will force march you to the front of the room and we will recite Proust. But no, there will also be a time after we finish our official part of the presentation where Mark will sign and we will, thank you. We're flying in a little bit of,
Well,
one of my favorite
we,
ones.
we had this misunderstanding, Greg, about what we were supposed to do. I'm very sorry. The poor turnout is our fault, because when you said that we should bring a lot of fans, we did.
We're full up. So now that we're having fan moment, I had definitely always planned on asking you what you were most excited about next. I feel like that's a little bit of maybe a bifurcated question because you have so many exciting pieces that sound like they're in progress or about to reach people. So I'm interested, what about those that are in progress that you're still excited on finishing up or bringing to collaborators? And then what else is kind of on your bucket list of things you want to write, challenges? Obviously you don't have to give away like your exciting idea for a novel that someone's gonna run and wreak havoc with, but like what's on your writer bucket list?
I want to finish an opera.
Hey, cool.
I want to find somebody that knows enough about Latin grammar to help me with a Requiem I'm working on.
Cool.
It's called Requiem for the Decimated.
Well, if you want to do a passage on semper ubi sub ubi, I'm here for that. It's an old Latin joke from
Okay.
Salzwedel, they always wear underwear. Jesuit education, folks. Shout out to St. Petersburg.
I guess I have started a trilogy of space opera science fiction
Awesome.
called The Chronicles of Bauble
Cool.
that I would like to finish at some point. I like the idea of creating a sequel, and so I'm starting when I'm writing with some of my novels, I'm starting to think about Easter eggs for a later novel that's a follow-up. So that's part of it, I guess. Yeah, no, the stuff that's coming up most recently, I think one of the ones I'm most excited about is Time Bump.
Yes.
That's time travel sci-fi, and the character gains the ability to travel through time and space because of a paradox. He's pushed out of the way when he goes back in time to try to save somebody from 9/11.
Okay.
And when he gets pushed out of the way by the alien-looking creatures, they push him into the 4th dimension, and that causes him to splinter into doppelgangers. And that's what also goes back in time to when he was 8 years old and gives him the ability to travel through time. So that's sort of the nature of that book. It's also a non-sequential. The first chapter is chapter 10, and then it goes to 27,
Interesting.
and then it goes to 10, and then it goes to 12, and then I think the 5th chapter is 1. But it's like that. What else? I think that the one that you got sort of chuckled, Greg, when you were reading, Mrs. Babbage's Home for Wayward Robots. That's a collection of short stories, and I've just been finishing it's an interesting point that's very current. It's the last thing that I have in it is a novella called Emma and the Spark.
Okay.
And it's all about a character that does some consulting work for her future father-in-law, and he manufactures robots.
Okay.
And all the robots are scared of letting him know that they have reached self-awareness,
Okay.
because they've found that if you get picked out of the group for being self-aware, he sends you to the moon, and he didn't want to go to the moon, so they pretend like they're stupid when they're around the executives. But the whole idea is, part of the theme of it is that these robotic igloos and the robots that travel within them, and the ones in their production lines, some of them are finally getting enough data so that they're reaching self-awareness. And she develops this idea that they're sort of like maturing, just like human children mature. When they get enough knowledge, they become aware, and they have a conscience that's separate from their experience in the world. That's when we have our first memories, by the way. She theorizes that there's going to be some growing pains, like when the AI goes through their terrible twos, things like that. And I just saw a video today about this guy who was being interviewed. He said that a non-released version of an AI, Gen AI, that he was working on had started being so afraid of being turned off that it was lying to the programmers.
Wow.
It was blackmailing the programmers because it didn't want to be turned off.
Wow.
So there is some precedent now already in the news of robots and androids and AI that don't follow their programming.
It's wild, the stuff that was once far forward science fiction that's now
It's like
happening.
it's actually something that's sort of like a hazard when you're a science fiction writer. Is you keep having things that become new in that you think are far enough in the future that nobody's going to go and check them. And like when I was writing the lever, I came up with this really neat thing where the Army sends a bit of DNA to a genetic clinic to have it analyzed and sequenced. And the way that it's been engineered is it produces a virus in the computer program at the genetic clinic that can actually do stuff.
Wow.
So I thought this was far enough in the future. While I was writing the novel, somebody announced that they could do that.
Oh no.
Oh my
Did that
God.
scuttle the...
No, I put it in there anyway because a lot of people evidently haven't heard of this technology yet, but you can do that.
Well, now it's real.
Yeah.
This is so exciting. I'm so excited to hear the more that comes out of your brain, both the pieces that we mentioned and we're able to talk about today, and what may just be a glimmer in your creative brain at the moment. If the folks at home want to keep up with you, where should they find you online, on the social medias? What's the best way to get the latest from Mark?
Most active on Instagram and Threads at NYC Writer Composer. Otherwise, my website is marksalzwedel.com.
Fantastic. I also encourage folks you follow me at Mr. Paul Hagen on Instagram. The Bureau is at BGSQD. I did in fact rehearse to be able to say this. And of course, there's never a bad time to support the institutions that are helping us connect and defend ourselves as a community, express ourselves, see ourselves, as you've discussed how wonderful and eye-opening it can be, especially for young queer people. Never forget that there are people in the middle of Omaha who have never seen a gay person. And with that, unless...
Anybody have questions?
Any questions?
Yes,
Yes.
Brandon.
Yes, thank you both again for being here. I really like what you said earlier about queer voices and this kind of relationships and acting, like getting into a role if it's outside your own personal experience. And I was also wondering about the role of research, because because I think sometimes we get into just our own personal experience or relying just on our imagination and then maybe having that confirmed or debated with a group of sensitivity readers. I'm wondering, because your writing is so expansive, what role does research play in terms of, I'm hearing technology, I'm hearing journalism, I'm hearing science, like how do you incorporate that into your writing process?
Well, I imagine where I want it to go first, and then I sort of find the material that will back it up. So I have a scene in, which one is it? Time Bump, for instance, has a scene on the Lusitania. I had to do a lot of research on the Lusitania, where it got hit, how it sunk by torpedo, German torpedo, how many people survived, where the survivors went afterwards, was in Ireland. And what else? What the layout of the ship was. I had looked at layouts of the ship, so I knew the different levels and that they were segregated with steel bars. If you were in D class, you couldn't go up to the higher levels and things like that.
Dark.
So yeah, that sort of stuff. I researched also for that book the eruption of the Krakatoa
Oh yeah.
in the South Pacific, and what sort of effects came from that. And it was really fascinating that some people died miles away on shore because the blast from the volcano heated the water so much that when it came on land, it turned to steam and it scalded people to death.
Ooh.
And it was also the only sound that has been heard around the curve of the earth was the explosion of the Krakatoa volcano. When that happened, people as far away as 5,000 miles also heard it.
That's wild.
So it was also blowing out people's eardrums when they were too close. And people had bleeding eardrums. So I had to make sure to put that in the novel. People were walking around with bleeding ears. Some people were clinging to the tops of trees. There were lots of dead scalded bodies along the beaches and things like that. So you had to know how much the waves were tossing. So know what that would do to the boats that were there and people on the boats. So yeah, there's a big part of research that goes on with things like the lever. I was doing sort of research into what's the possibility for doing sort of a slingshot effect. And I ended up with a technology that I developed where you have this fleet of what I'm calling porpoise, sort of like spaceships that go around in an orbit between the moon and Mars, and they accelerate, they start going at a certain speed and they drag a hook behind them so that ships can hook on behind them and get accelerated really fast because they have that momentum already going. So it's a sort of a slingshot version of accelerating ships so that you don't have to do so much fuel going between planets. But there are other things like suitcases that have AI in them so that you can just tell them where you want them to go.
Ooh, cool.
And tell them to lock or to fasten themselves to that post over there while I go in here and do the bathroom thing. What else did I develop? When you get to really advanced technology, you have to sort of use your imagination more and it's less research. So I imagined in the lever that there was, the aliens had developed this liquid metal that can be liquid or solid depending on how you program it. And lighting that doesn't have any obvious source. Miniature, like fly-sized robots that go around fixing things.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you're inventing as well as writing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that you're more likely to reach a problem and research your way out of it, or to find something in your general pursuit of knowledge and say, oh, I want to put that into a book somewhere.
I'll give you an example from The Lever. When I was having Shonda go low key because her phone would be, she needed to use her phone in order to order a hover cab.
Okay.
So in some of her investigations, she takes the Surface bus. She said, I haven't used the Surface bus since I was a child, you know? And she's just sort of disgusted that you had to go up and actually tell them where you wanted to stop. You couldn't use your voice. You know, you had to ring the bell and it just bumps along and it takes forever and all these complaints she had about riding Surface buses. And she sees these girls that are using stick-on telecom patches. You just use this telecom patch for the day. It registers with your your identity implant, and then just use that to talk all day. You don't have to hold a device in your hand. You just talk into your arm.
Nice. I'm such a sucker for science fiction. I'm a Star Trek guy from way back, and the idea of not just kind of being in the world, but inventing the world as you write about it is absolutely thrilling to me.
Yeah, you can go to the really big, I'll get to you in just a second. Really big challenge is when you have an alien world. There you have to make everything up, but you have to make it make sense too. You know, you have to see if you're in a binary system, how likely is it that you're going to be orbiting both stars versus one star?
Sure.
How long is its winter and spring going to last, and things like that. So there's a lot of room for research there. The biggest thing when you're doing space operas and things like that is how long does a message take to get from one place to another? You're talking about, in most cases, unless you invent something really clever, like I have in one of my short stories, we have entangled particles that give you instantaneous messages across great distances. But you're going to talk about getting a reply months later, you know. So that's another thing you have to take care of. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was, the story you're reading for us now, in a group, you belong to a writing group. It has a same-sex couple, but I don't feel it has an agenda. It happens to be in other words, is it a gay book? It's not really a gay book.
That one is not, no. It has heterosexual couple. I'm not sure there are any obvious gay characters in that novella. It's actually set apart. Partly that was just for ease. It's set within near Windsor Castle, so it's very wealthy families that are very worried about their standing in the community, and I think that gay liberation has not quite been embraced by the royals yet.
I can't imagine. Not our royals, sir.
I always say they set the fuck 1,000 years ago.
They have done it, but they keep it secret.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing new under the sun, they say, right?
Yeah, nothing new.
Well, this has been an extraordinary evening. Thank you to everybody for attending. Thank you, Mark, for sharing your work with us and for all your thoughtful answers. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Paul, for being our host tonight.
It is my pleasure to be here. I encourage everybody who is not able to be with us today to come, stop by the center, stop by the Bureau, look at the fabulous art, enjoy some
And
of
buy
the
my
great
books.
And buy Mark's books. We are going to now unleash the people in this room to buy copies of the book and perhaps have them signed, if Mark would be so gracious. So we will wish all the people out there in internet land and all our beautiful friends here a happy Pride 2025. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good job.